So here we go then. After 3 days, the final session. We don't save the best for last because all the sessions are wonderful in LTOC. But I'm sure if you've attended other chapters of LTOC, you will have seen Terrie before, and you know that she brings a lot of wealth of information to the table. But if you don't know Terrie, she's been a teacher, trainer, academic manager, and English language teacher for over 20 years in countries all around the globe. She's been a teacher trainer for the last 10 years, and you probably have seen her, certainly where she lives, delivering training sessions, teaching young learners, for university students, adults, and business English. She's currently working as a teacher trainer for Oxford University Press in Saudi Arabia, where she organises training events for outside speakers and delivers specialised teaching programs. She has written lots of bespoke training programs, and she's been a consultant on syllabus design for schools and universities and assisted them in all their continual professional development. She's also one of the Oxford Teachers Academy tutors. Now, remember, we've talked about that already, and we'll talk about that again. 15% discount. Watch out for it coming up. So she is one of the tutors on that, and she's a firm believer in learner autonomy. And she's talking about something today which I think is really, really important in this day and age, about intercultural competence. So the final session of LTOC for this year, Terrie Craddock, please take it away.
Thank you, but for a very warm welcome. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Charlotte. I know Charlotte, my colleague, is in the background somewhere there. Thank you to all of you for a lovely warm welcome that you've been giving me in the chat box already. So I'm thrilled to get started on this last session of LTOC to round things up. I think this is a lovely topic to be dealing with, especially with, I've noticed all of you from lots of different countries. So this idea of somebody's mentioning diversity already is really important. Before we continue, I want to give a shout out to Charlotte, because Charlotte needs to take most of the credit for this session, because she actually created this session for us to share at Oxford, for me and my colleagues to share. So it is a Charlotte creation delivered by Terrie. So all credit to Charlotte there. Thank you very much. I've got lots and lots to share with you. So let's get started. Hello from Rangoon. Hello from Kazakhstan. I was in Kazakhstan recently. So we're already being very intercultural in the chat box. I love it. Okay, so my first question to you, and I'll try and make this as interactive as possible. I can see there are tons of you in the room, so I will try to read as many of your comments as I can. But my first question to you is around greetings. You're all from lots of different countries around the world. So my question to you is, in your country, from your culture, what is a typical way for you to greet people? Now, I don't know if Sean and Charlotte will back me up. It's been a long time since I've lived in the UK, but I think in the UK, we get a little bit confused as to how we meet people. Sometimes we shake hands, sometimes we give one kiss, sometimes we get confused as to which side we're giving that kiss. Some people give 2 kisses, and some people just say, hi, nice to meet you. So how do you greet people? So I can see you're giving the language that you greet people in, but do you shake hands? Do you give a kiss? Do you bow? I noticed somebody probably from Japan saying that they bow. 2 kisses, 2 besos. Okay, we say hello. I'm trying to keep up with this. Some people shake hands. Of course, there's a hug as well, if it's someone that you're perhaps familiar with, or some people are just huggers. I met someone for the first time the other day in a cafe I was introduced, and she was a hugger. So I think in the UK, we tend to be a little bit, as I said, a little bit confused as to how we actually greet people. So straight off the bat, we can see lots of different ways, just culturally, lots of different ways in just the way that we meet each other. So we're already getting into this idea of being diverse, things being very different around the world. And for us also to be aware of this, and I'm going to keep mentioning this afternoon, not just for us to be aware of this, but to bring our students awareness of how things are different and how we should celebrate the differences as well. Less hugs after COVID, very good point there. So let's have a look at what we're looking at this afternoon, or it's early evening for me. We're going to be thinking about intercultural competence and citizenship within the context of global skills. And I think probably most of you are quite familiar with global skills, but we'll run over those 5 clusters of global skills and do a quick summary of those. But then really reflect on what culture is, really reflect on intercultural competence. What does it mean to be a citizen? And then thinking about those 2 things, intercultural competence and citizenship, through projects or through different activities that we can do in the classroom with our students. One thing I wanted to mention to you around the wider topic of global skills is, of course, if you're not already aware, Oxford has a position paper on global skills. So there's a QR code that you can use there to download for free. If you want more information about global skills, you can find them in download our position paper. These position papers are really good because they give you a nice overview of the topic, but as you go through the papers, you get lots of ideas about how to implement the different clusters of global skills within your classroom. Okay, we're still greeting in the chat box. So in Poland, I see, Justina, you've got different things that you do as well. So there could be hugs, there could be 3 kisses, or just a hello or a good morning. Fabulous, thank you. So my next question to you, we can see our global skills clusters on the screen right now, the 5 global skills. My question to you is, don't worry if you're not familiar with them, because as I said, I'm going to run over them very quickly, and we're going to go in and do a deeper dive with intercultural competence and citizenship. But my question to you now in the chat box, please, is out of these 5 clusters, which would you say you are most familiar with, or which would you say that you feel you implement most in the classroom at present? So which one of these clusters do you feel most familiar with, or maybe most comfortable with, that you know the most about? Or which one do you feel that you implement most in your classroom? So we've got digital literacies. Somebody's saying emotional self-regulation and well-being. All of them, Svetlana, top marks for you. And it's typical, I think, for teachers to kind of come up with the communication and collaboration. It's sort of what we do naturally as language teachers, isn't it? So thinking about communication and collaboration, this is where we want our students communicating effectively. Obviously, we're language teachers, but we want them to be communicating in a sensitive way with others and in a range of different contexts. We want them collaborating, sharing together, supporting other students in the class and in life in general. And when we think about creativity and our critical thinking, this, of course, is about thinking flexibly, about generating new ideas, thinking about solutions for problem solving, encouraging students to express themselves in a creative way through different types of language. And a few of you have mentioned the emotional self-regulation and well-being. This is a really hot topic, quite rightly at the moment, isn't it? So this is about students and ourselves as well, recognizing and understanding our emotions, being able to be in a position to choose, let's say, healthy strategies for managing our emotions and stressful situations, thinking about how to take actions that can help physically, mentally, to encourage a kind of healthy lifestyle, if you like. A few of you also mentioned digital literacies, and it doesn't surprise me that that particular cluster is something that you feel you implement nowadays. Though this idea of digital technologies being used to communicate, but to communicate safely and effectively, with a range, I would say, of different digital technologies. Just keeping my eye on the chat box. It does move quickly. All right. But as I said, what we are going to be focusing on today is international competence and citizenship. So in the chat box, over to you again. I'm going to keeping you awake in this last session. If I said to you, could you give me a sentence, a phrase, even a word? What does intercultural competence and citizenship mean to you? So if you were to give me a phrase or a sentence, if you don't have any ideas, that's absolutely fine at this point. That's what this session is for. So we've got respect, empathy, tolerance, humanity, tolerance, inclusivity, harmony, all lovely words, all these lovely inclusive words. I love that we're finishing LTOC off in this way, being respectful, understanding. Chat box is going very quickly. Tolerance, respect, wonderful. Super. Thank you very much for that. So if we start with intercultural competence, then we'll get to citizenship as well. But thinking about the way that we live in an interconnected, environment, basically. And this kind of interconnected world that we live in, this diverse world that we live in, intercultural competence, we can say, is really essential. So these are the skills that enable individuals to build really meaningful relationships with people everywhere. This is how we collaborate together effectively across cultural boundaries, and how we contribute positively to this sort of multicultural society and to sort of global communities, let's say. But I can see a few of you are saying you're interested to know, how do we do this? How do we do this in the classroom? You're already asking that question. The good news is that you're probably already teaching intercultural competence. So course books nowadays will have embedded in them and integrated in them reference to intercultural competence. So you will find lots of listenings and lots of reading texts with reference to intercultural competence. Any good course book from course books from Oxford University Press, definitely for many years have been integrating intercultural competence into the course book. But what we should be thinking about is doing it with intention. So doing it with our students, that we don't just, it's another text that we pass by, but that we stop and we get our students to think, and we ask the right questions, and we get our students asking the right questions. So teaching intercultural competence with an intention, or with intention. And this, working on this intercultural competence is really to our advantage. It's really central to language teaching, and it involves learners developing an awareness of their own cultural perspectives. And this really interesting, and it is interesting for students and for learners to develop an awareness about different attitudes and an openness, and this word respect that many of you have used as well, respect for other cultures. So that's kind of what the intercultural competence part of it is all about. So back to you. I have made a little, because you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can never stop with your teacher's head. So I've made this little gap fill for you in the chat box, and I will be quiet for half a minute and give you half a minute to read through these. In the chat box, can you just put down a number and a word that relates to that number to fill in the gaps? So lovely to see your ideas, but can you put a number next to them so I know what you're referring to? So we've got global, we've got culture coming up a lot. We have respect coming up a lot. Be helpful if you put the numbers next to it. Okay, so a lot of you dealing with number 1. Okay. Let's get conscious, culture, respect. The chat box is going so quickly. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes to work your way down. We're getting down to number 3. Group, conscious, respectful, wonderful. Keep those answers coming in. Get some answers for number 4 as well. Has anybody worked their way down that far? We've got some words that I don't have in my gap fill. So there's you being creative. Okay, super. Let's have a look at those answers then. And in the chat box, can you tell me, are there any that you were surprised with? Any that you didn't get? I saw lots of you, lots of the word respect being typed a lot, the word culture, global. Maybe you didn't get a chance to get to number 4. But we have roles and responsibilities for the last one. So it's this idea that we are reminding our students and reminding ourselves sometimes how important it is to be culturally sensitive and to be respectful. We understand it, but I think it's this idea of this intention of being aware of it more often. Encouraging our students to be curious about their own culture as well. And I find definitely with younger students, they're very interested in other cultures and they're very interested in comparing things that go on in other cultures to their own culture. And it is interesting. I can remember hundreds of years ago when I was at school and we were learning French. And I have to admit, I wasn't a brilliant language learner when I was a child, but it was really interesting when we had the lessons about things that went on in France, kind of food that they ate. I remember there was a lesson about the city that they made perfume in France, and I used to think that was fascinating. So learning a language is not just about the words, it's about the culture as well. Okay, well done, everybody. So thinking about an example then from my own life and an example from my context of my career and where I work. So I'm English. I'm actually from the UK. I was born and raised in the UK, although I left in my early 20s. And I was thinking the other day, and this is showing my age, I think I've lived outside of the UK now for longer than I've lived in the UK. But over the years, I've worked, another thing I was thinking about the other day, I've actually worked in 10 different countries around the world now. Some of them I've been teaching for 2-3 years. Some of them it's been a 6-month contract, but a lot of different countries around the world. And obviously, during that time of living in different countries, it was really important that I learn about the culture that I was living in. I wasn't always able, before you say anything, to learn all the languages of the 10 countries that I lived in. But it was really important and really interesting for me to try to understand the different culture. And you find yourself adjusting certain behaviors as well to fit with the environment that you're in. And this could be of our students. Some of our students might face this reality. Some of them might need English to travel and work in different countries when they grow up, or sort of later on in their lives as well. And then they're going to need to be open to learn about different cultures. And even if they don't travel to work and live in different countries, the chances are, as we become more global, that they are going to need to understand more cultures, that as the world becomes smaller, they're going to need to know, probably need to be working with different cultures. So they need to keep an open mind about this. If we think as well, now that I'm kind of settled in one place, so I currently live in Dubai. My situation is that I'm living in Dubai, but I work a lot. My work takes me to Saudi Arabia, it takes me to Jordan. Here in Dubai, I also work in Bahrain, I work in Oman. But thinking about the team that I work in as well for Oxford University Press, I work as a part of a team that compromises people of 9 nationalities, and we're based in 9 separate countries, with many people, many members of our team living in a culture that isn't the one that they grew up in. And also, obviously, we work with teachers from all parts of the world. So recently I was in Kazakhstan doing training. And this means that we have to constantly think about these cultural differences and the impact that they have on our work. We need to think about how we share information in a way that is respectful and in a way that teachers understand us. So the example probably for me at the moment is I have to be super aware and sensitive that cultures in this part of the world, for example in Saudi, are quite conservative, and I need to understand that and be respectful towards that as well. So it's constantly thinking about these cultural differences. And this is not only for me, but also the colleagues that I work with as well. Okay, back to you, over to you. I'm going to shift slightly. We've been talking about intercultural competence, and I've shared some things about my life. What I think is important to think of as well is that culture is fluid. Culture changes all the time, and we don't want to slide into the area of stereotyping as well, because I think that's a sort of a dangerous area to be, this assumption of how people are, because culture changes all the time. So let's have a little quiz, just a couple of slides with you. You can obviously see the common, I'm going to call it the common potato. Everybody knows this vegetable. So my first question to you is, what do we know about the world? And some things that might surprise you. So where do potatoes come from? And you're already starting to answer it. We've got America, Mexico, Ireland. Somebody says Peru, America, America. Where does the common potato come from? They're delicious. Oh, and how many, another question could be, how many different ways are there to cook a potato or present a potato? Lots of people saying America. I think lots of you are thinking of French fries, or chips as we call them in the UK. South America. So a few of you are thinking South America. We are getting answers, very, very diverse answers. So if we were doing a pub quiz right now, we're getting answers from basically everywhere around the world. You might be surprised to know that originally the potato came from Peru. A couple of you have mentioned Peru, so I don't know if you've got round to Googling it or you actually knew that the potato comes from Peru. But that's where it originates, and there are over 3,000 different edible types of potato that are still grown in Peru. And what's interesting to think about, just a small thing like a potato, is that everybody's familiar with it. Everybody's familiar with French fries and different ways of cooking potatoes and eating potatoes. Without the global movements that there have been throughout history, without the migrations, without the trade, the communication, the collaboration that we have in place, we probably wouldn't be able to eat the potato in lots of different areas that we do around the world. So well done for those of you who guessed Peru. And you've already gone in. You're going to make everybody really hungry here. You've already gone into different recipes with a potato too. Okay, let's have a look at the next picture. What can you see? There are a few different things in this picture that can be seen as culturally diverse, let's say, or from a specific culture. But what can you see in this picture and where does it come from? So let's focus on, okay, most of you are saying Scotland. The bagpipes from Scotland. A few of you have noticed that there's a tattoo there, a henna tattoo. So quite a few of you have got a good eye. Tartan. I'm thinking specifically of the bagpipes. So you can see the guy in the picture here is playing the bagpipes. And most of you are saying that the bagpipes come from Scotland. And a few of you are mentioning about the henna tattoo with a connection to India, connection to ancient Egypt, I can see as well. But when we think about the bagpipes, you might be surprised to learn, a couple of you mentioned Saudi, you might be surprised to learn that the bagpipes actually originate in the Middle East. And they spread across Europe, reaching Scotland not until the 14th century. So that might be, yes, I know, exactly, Miriam. It surprised me as well when I was looking for interesting facts. But you're right about the henna tattoo. I was reading about the henna tattoo today, and it does, as I said, it has connections to India, also has connections to ancient Egypt. Okay, so what can you see in the next picture, and where do you think this comes from? Okay, so we've got flamenco, with a lot of you saying that it comes from Spain. Spain. Most of us are familiar with flamenco coming from Spain, as was I until I did some more digging. So this is a dance, if you're not familiar with the picture, this is a dance called flamenco that we normally associate as coming from Spain. However, there is a connection. A couple of you have mentioned India because of the, I can see in the chat box there, a few of you mentioning India originally. So yes, there are connections with Rajasthan and this flamenco costume as well. Again, this is something that surprised me. So it's this idea, as I mentioned before, about culture being, it's fluid. there are changing aspects, and it really depends on different communities. And these are all communities that, you know, globally we move around these communities. Okay. So let's move on to think about citizenship then. And I think, well, let's see what you feel about citizenship. If I were to say to you, what does citizenship mean to you? So sort of moving aside intercultural competence and just this idea of citizenship, what does that mean for you? And we can think about citizenship, can't we, on different levels. There's a sort of local or a national level. Citizenship can also be wider than that. Belonging, Nada says, being responsible, regionalism, okay, unity, hands in hand, loving your country, your nationality, rights and responsibilities, great. Being part of a community. I froze, I hope I'm back. Belonging to a place, living in a city. You guys are doing really well. Lots and lots of comments in the chat box right to the end of LTalk. I'm very impressed and very appreciative. Thanks for your comments. Wonderful. Children all over the world. How great is that? So let's think of it in these three different ways of local, national, or international. So at a kind of local level, we think of citizenship referring to being, as you have said in the chat box, many of you have said, a member of a specific community, a city or a region. And this idea of local citizenship really means, or can mean, participation, for example, in local governance. It could be about voting in municipality elections. It local taxes, contributing to the community, activities, the services. It's about following local laws, regulations, participating in local initiatives, for example. And then if we think nationally, and a few of you have mentioned nationally as well, citizenship is about belonging to a country, a sort of a nation state, if you like. So it's about rights, responsibilities, privileges that are granted by a government of a particular country to its citizens. So this idea of national citizenship usually can involve voting in national elections, serving in the military if required, paying your national taxes, and enjoying different kinds of protections, entitlements. And it also encompasses kind of adhering to the country's laws as well. And possibly participating in civic duties and obligations. And then if we think about citizenship on an international level, sort of similar to intercultural competence, it's this idea of global citizenship or world citizenship, let's say, which obviously is kind of broader than your national boundaries. So it's this idea that global citizenship emphasizes this sense of belonging to a broader human community, regardless of where you're from. This idea that we recognize and respect being connected to people around the world, promoting human rights and social justice, environmental sustainability, for example, and really kind of encouraging active engagement as well in global challenges such as poverty, for example. Okay, so what the thing that I'm sure a few of you are thinking about. What does it mean for my teaching? What does this mean in the classroom? So we've had a bit of a dive into intercultural competence and citizenship, and thank you for sharing your ideas to us as teachers and educators then. So as I said before, the good news is that intercultural competence and citizenship are a really good fit for the English language classroom. And most course books nowadays will encourage students to learn about people of their own age, doing different things around the world, and then compare different cultures to their own lives and to kind of how they, for example, how they learn or what they eat or what they celebrate. And this is this kind of step to encourage students to demonstrate openness and getting them to be curious about the differences and the similarities around the world. And we've got an example here from the course book Beehive, and this is Beehive for Unit 4, Lesson 5. I'm going to push my face up against the camera now so I can see it properly. But this is around the topic of festivals. And you get this quite often in course books where students, they listen and they read to two different students. So I think there's one here from the USA and one from Vietnam, and they're talking about sharing different festivals from their country. So obviously I'm going to come back to you here. In the chat box, please can you tell us a festival from your country that you think the rest of us might have heard of? So in the chat box, can you give us an example? Pancake Day. Thank you, Charlotte. You're making me hungry. Diwali, Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead, Beer Festival, Carnival in Brazil, of course. The Day of the Dead, Diwali, Eid. So this goes to show the chat box going mad now with lots of you sharing all your different festivals from around the world. We all have festivals. We all enjoy festivals. So it's a really good topic for students as well to pick up, to not just think about festivals that might be coming up in their countries, but to learn about festivals in other countries as well. Generally, especially younger learners are really interested in this kind of thing. So you've got a level of motivation for primary age kids and teenagers as well. Halloween, of course. We can also this is something that I think is quite an interesting way of what I would say weaving in intercultural competence and citizenship into example sentences. So at the same time, we're obviously always helping our learners to understand and practice new language, but we can do this through the topic of other cultures as well. So giving students example sentences that represent different things from different cultures. So I'd like you to have a look, and I will be quiet and give you a minute to look through these sample sentences. Now, these are taken from Zarina Subhan's blog that she wrote about intercultural competence for Oxford. And I'd like you to read through these sentences that all illustrate the way things are done differently in different countries, but also to think in the chat box, what language point are these sentences practicing? So what kind of grammar do you think these sentences are practicing? Okay, Maria focuses on sentence structure. We've got linkers. You should be able to see the sentences on the slides. Linking words, connectors. It's coming towards the end of LTOC and you're still switched on. Well done. Yeah, so for those of you who put linkers, connectives, so we've got because of, that's why, as a result of, consequently. So this is a way of kind of weaving in competence as well. One of the things that I think intercultural competence sits really naturally with is projects. So this idea of learning about different cultures, a really nice way of getting students to practice this, to focus this, to produce something around intercultural competence is through projects. In the chat box, can you tell me how many of you have previously done projects with students that focus on any part of intercultural competence? PBL, yes, says Maria. How many of you have already done projects with your students with a focus on some kind of intercultural competence? Twinning, we have. You do IT a lot. Festivals, somebody's already done a project on festivals. We're going to have a look in the next few slides at some different ideas about using projects for a focus on intercultural competence. Debates, doing crafts, festivals, weddings. Weddings is a wonderful one. Lots of cultures celebrate weddings in different ways, don't they? Music, famous people, food, dance, of course, the environment, focusing on different environments around the world, gestures from around the world, housing, festivals again. Wonderful. I'm going to give you half a minute, and I will time this of half a minute. This is a really nice project, a really nice kind of personalized project. I'll give you half a minute just to read through it before I start talking about it so you know what I'm referring to. This is taken from the coursebook Project Explore Level 1 Unit 1. But just read through, if you just read through the points of the project, and I'm going to ask you some questions around it. A fingerprint portrait. So this is this idea of students actually making a personal portrait around their fingerprint, which is really neat. So they actually make their fingerprint on an ink pad and then they blow it up and then they write around it. So my question to you, it is really cool. It's really nice. It's a really nice personalized activity. So what kind of intercultural competence are students practicing by doing this? How does a project like this support intercultural competence and citizenship? It is creative, but it's also nice and familiar for students as well. I always find with students, anything that's personalized is usually really successful. Identity. So a few of you are mentioning identity. And of course, if you display this as well, We're getting students, in terms of citizenship of the classroom, to notice each other's identity too. So this is all about who they are, what they care about, where they're from, who their families are. Very simple project. And I'm sure if you're like me, I can remember projects from when I was teaching. The simpler, the better, the more manageable, the better. Some of those large scale projects can get really out of hand with glue and glitter and all the rest of it. It's all about their world, Maria, isn't it? Yeah, this is a super little, easy to do project as well. So thinking about how you can make a project based around reality. So based around, for example, some of the challenges or some of the problems that are faced at school. What challenges and problems do you face in your school? These could be around behaviour. Do you, for example, have an issue with students using mobile phones too much? Kids running in the corridors? What about the issue of bullying, for example, or students' wellness or anxiety? Are students eating healthy food at school? Are they bringing in healthy food? Are the classrooms clean? Who has that job to do? Mental health is an issue. Anxiety is an issue. You have healthy food. Good. All of them, somebody said. Okay, so lots to get your teeth into there. Behavior, emotional problems, exam phobia. We could even widen that circle to think about issues from citizenship in terms of local challenges, let's say. So are playgrounds safe and clean? Do people litter? Do they drop rubbish? Are people driving too fast in the area? What about local people? Are there local, maybe older people who are lonely? Do they need help? Is this something that we can stop and ask ourselves, or get students to stop and think what they could do to help in these situations, being part of a citizen of the area? So this is what I'm kind of getting towards, is this idea of school responsibility projects. And this is a really nice one. But this idea of projects being based on real needs is important. And this is an example that Charlotte, thank you Charlotte, gave me, which was taken from a school in Turkey, which noticed that something more could be done to really help students move from the KG level to primary. So they noticed there's quite a lot of stress in the KG level. And the project was led by a 3rd grade class. So I'm going to give you half a minute to read through this and give me your ideas or your responses to this type of project in the chat box. Is this something you feel that you could do? This idea of projects having a kind of local, real life kind of focus. This idea of getting students to be more responsible for the school that they're in and to be more collective. Okay, some of you saying that yes, it is something you can do. You like the idea of this project. It's quite a big project. Getting students to have a school responsibility project really encourages them to collaborate, to work together. Interclass projects then. So these can help students settle in, for example, with a buddy system or getting students to teach each other. It could be cross-curricular, so you could be working with teachers from other subjects, or some kind of school responsibility, working on some real problems facing the school, maybe such as being kind. A few of you have mentioned that, or getting students to clean up after themselves. Or this idea of a community project. So maybe it's cultivating a community garden, or reading, or making and selling things for charity. Getting students to be collectively responsible for the environment that they are in. So when I was younger, hundreds of years ago, we used to have pen pals. And this is kind of what this refers to, this idea of international partnering. I don't know if any of you do any kind of, some of you mentioned twinning before. Any of you have been involved in any projects with international partnering, but I remember when I had my French lessons as a child, we used to have a town in France where there was a school that we had pen friends from, and it was the most exciting thing because we didn't have internet. That's how old I am. Back then we used to write a letter, put it in the envelope, and think about my letter going all the way to France. And then when I received a letter from France from my pen friend, it was all very, very exciting. So a few of you had pen pals as well. So this is this idea of being interconnected, an interconnected world. And this can support language learning. So we used to write our letters in French, goodness knows whether they could understand them. And then we would receive the letters in English as well. So it had a language focus. But this idea of a collective project with another school in another country doesn't have to just be a pen pal. But getting students to be more engaged as well, and giving them opportunities possibly to use English as well in a natural way. It's really, really motivating for them to be part of that, feel that they're part of that group as well. I think something to mention about projects as well, when you're starting something new, and this might seem obvious, but I will always say with projects, start small, be realistic, make sure that they are achievable. Is your project meaningful? Is it going somewhere? And really get students involved in the planning of the project as well. Does it support the curriculum? Can your learners draw from what they already know? But these projects are going to help students to personalize their learning, and it's going to help them to think more about global issues and how global issues fit into their lives as well. Twinning is a very attractive, yeah, definitely. And students love it. It's very motivating for them. Okay, we're coming towards the wrap up of this session. Thank you very much for staying with me. Thank you very much for your comments. We're going to think about an exit ticket. I'm sure most of you are familiar with exit tickets. They're a really good, quick way to get students to reflect back on a lesson, and I'm going to do an exit ticket with you. So this is your opportunity to reflect back over this particular session. And in the chat box, I would like you, your last task before you run away, I would like you to, in a phrase or a sentence, summarize. You can do one of three things. Summarize what the session is about, or how has this session answered any questions that you might have had, or any questions that you still have about the session. So one of three things. You can write me a brief summary or just a word. What questions did I answer for you in this session? And do you have any other questions? Lots of thank yous. ways to make lessons interesting, intercultural communication, practical ideas. Great. Hopefully you can try a project with your students to give them more intercultural competence and citizenship. I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being at LTOC. I don't know if my moderators can help with any questions. The chat box has gone far too quickly for me to know to deal with.
There are a couple in the Q&A tab, or I can pick some out if you want.
Okay. Let me just have a look. So Arif asks how to include cultural competence in the classroom. Arif, I would say oh, thank you. I would say to begin with, as I said, as you go through course books, the course books have been doing this for a number of years. Notice throughout the units how your course book, that's a good way to start. Notice how the course book deals with intercultural competence. So notice if you have any readings or listenings throughout units that mention how different cultures do things. And most course books will talk about food being different in different cultures, or festivals, the way people dress, for example, the way people greet each other, or it might be weddings. The course book is a good place to start, I would say. Any suggestions on projects for adult students, Linda says. I would say I still think that doing a project, or let's maybe think of it as a task, if you wanted to make it smaller, depending on the time that you have. I still think these topics are interesting for adults as well, Linda. You might not have your project be quite as kind of artsy and crafty, but I would be focusing more on a project with students that would be presenting their project, so focusing on presentation skills. So it may even be just a PDF that they've done research on, and that they have information to share with the rest of the group. But I still think projects are relevant for adults.
Probably time for one more, Terrie, if you want.
Okay. Lynn is asking about teaching a class with monolingual students. What would be your advice to make them more interested in the importance of cultural communication? Again, start with the course book. And I find that students that are in a monolingual class, they don't need to be in a class with the classroom atmosphere itself doesn't have to have students from lots of different cultural backgrounds. It doesn't matter. I think it's this idea, and again, start with the course book. The topics through the course book will bring up intercultural competence, like the festivals, the weddings, the food, but it's also drawing students' awareness to that, but also reminding them, so how does that compare to our culture? How are these people in different countries doing things differently? And how is that different to us, and what does that mean? I hope that helps.
I would agree completely. I mean, just because it's a monolingual classroom doesn't mean to say the students aren't going to communicate with people anyway outside the classroom because of the internet. So
exactly
right. So that's just about your time, Terrie. Would you like to say goodbye?
Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye. And enjoy. It's a Saturday, isn't it? Enjoy the rest of your weekend. If any colleagues in Saudi, then that's the end of your weekend. But for the rest of you, thank you so much. Thank you for your useful comments in the chat box, and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.